Welcome, Frasier fans, to this inaugural episode of the Joyous and the Jejune, the review series for the new series of Frasier. I am one of your erstwhile hosts, Stu.
And I am the other one, Alastair. Stu, what a pleasure to be here with you talking about Frasier in 2023. Did we ever think we would see this moment?
No, absolutely not. I thought when season 11 finished, I thought that was absolutely it. Didn't even have aspirations or thoughts about a movie or anything like that, which you quite often do when a series ends and you miss it. No, I was quite surprised to learn it was coming back. So, how about yourself?
Yeah, it was very hard to imagine, wasn't it? I think there was such acclaim for the ending, and it was very beloved by the fans, and to have both of those things together, where it's well considered by critics and audience alike, is a rarity, right? Especially after 11 seasons, not counting Cheers appearances prior to that. So very tough to imagine it being revisited, but a very interesting time to do it. You know, we've had a lot of shows resurrected or characters from them resurrected. I absolutely never thought that I would be sitting watching season 3 of Twin Peaks a few years ago when that happened. And likewise, I didn't really believe that we would get kind of the pseudo Next Generation season 8 that was season 3 of Picard. So, it's certainly a time for these things. And I think we've already kind of agreed without giving too much away that there's certainly plenty to say about this. However you feel about the first few episodes, it's a very interesting watch to talk over. So yep, there will be no shortage of jejune and joyous things for us to discuss.
Absolutely. And I think that's an excellent point for us to give fair warning to our viewers that there will be spoilers involved. So if you're not caught up yet, we are doing this in segments. So we're going to do episode 1 first. We're going to talk about that. Then we'll talk about episode 2 and episode 3. So if you have watched, say, episode 1 and 2, Windgrace, who is a particular fan of our reviews, has commented already that big Frasier fan. So, but Windgrace hadn't watched episode 3, so you're okay at the moment. But when it gets to episode 3, you might want to go and watch it first if you want to avoid spoilers. Anyway, that's that bit. So, episode 1, The Good Father. Clearly a play on the first episode of Frasier, The Good Son.
Yes.
Um,
A large reputation to live up to.
mm, did it? So I'm gonna pose a question to you now. Did it instantly grab you, or did it take a while to bed in?
Just this episode, Stu.
Just this episode.
I I would have to give you a little bit of a split answer, actually, which is that I think that Kelsey Grammer, it was amazing to see him apparently immediately snap back into the role of Fraser Crane after what is it, almost 20 years off the air of playing that character. I felt that performance was astonishingly quick to rope you back into that character. I felt that the show um, as a whole is still a bit of a mixed bag, even as the episodes that we've seen so far progress. So it's a no for me on being sort of immediately totally sold on the reboot from the first episode. What about yourself?
So within seconds, it almost lost me. Um,
Okay.
and it was one particular thing. the scene opens, we're at the airport. Kelsey Grammer walks into shot, and the audience start whooping and cheering. Now, I know that's a very American thing, but it's like, who were they expecting? You know what I mean? That just felt like, oh. But then we started getting dialogue. We started getting back and forth, particularly between Frasier and Alan. I think that's a dynamic that, well, let's just say I'll be revisiting that. That dynamic
Lots to say,
that
yeah.
so I I won't say the first episode grabbed me, but it could also have gone a very different path and really been very disappointing, which it wasn't. So
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where the original run of Frasier is such good comedy television that it shouldn't be underestimated what a feat it is not to simply be hated by comparison as a latter day reboot. So
that's a fair comment. Yeah.
props to them for avoiding that, because I think it would be a lot easier to fall into that than people might at first think. And to be fair to this first episode, there were parts of it that really did grab me, but some of that was in a fit very weirdly with this being the first episode of a new show, which I'll get to later as we discuss things. So
Well, do you know what? I think that's a perfect place to dive into our Joyous and Jejune, which is what we've promised the viewers. So let's go in with the Joyous. What was your joyous moment?
tell you what, Stu, before we start into that, shall we give viewers who might be coming to us fresh for Frasier, who may, shock horror, have no interest in Star Trek, a little breakdown of what the Joyous and Jejune format means for us in this show?
That's an excellent idea. Yes, because yeah, there are people who don't like Star Trek, which is incredible. But if you're watching this and you're new to the channel and you do like Star Trek, go and watch our other Good, Bad, and Batshit, which is our review episodes of Star Trek episodes where we find the things we like, the things that could be better, and the things that are absolutely crazy. So for this, yeah, I thought so it was yourself that suggested the Jejune, which I thought was
The Jejune.
absolutely perfect for this. And of course, you know, being the verbose, eloquent individual that Frasier is, Joyous and Jejune. So yeah, we're looking at things that stood out for us in the episode as being the most joyous moments, and the things that were perhaps a little flat, a little lackluster, and in a word, jejune. We also, after we've done that, we give our favorite quotes from the episode as well. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
what's an episode of Frasier without a great quote? That's that's a thought. So, but anyway, so after that great recap for us, yes, the joyous moments of this one. Um, I think that one of the things that was difficult about this episode, and that's hard for a lot of first episodes of shows, is that there was a lot of finding your feet. And there was a lot of characters obviously being introduced, with so many of them being new, and yet I still want to hold Frasier to a high standard, right? Even though this is technically a new show, when I'm thinking of what is joyous, what is like the peak of this show, I unavoidably at the moment cast my mind back to what would break that threshold for me in the original run of the show. So if my joyous list seems a little bit shorter than it might be in other episodes, I think for this one I was really kind of looking for what gets me closest to that old experience. What do I feel is a signpost that maybe this show can can come close to the heights of the original run. So one moment that I really enjoyed from that point of view, and it wasn't dwelt on too long, but was it was quite moving. It wasn't necessarily a comedic one. Is during all the farce that unfolds in this episode of Frasier having the confusion over what his son's relationship is to this woman that he's living with, and who this woman is, and the hiding of the child that she has from him. There's a wonderful moment where he believes that he is a grandfather in amongst all the farce. And Kelsey Grammer, it's not overacted, it's not dwelt on, but there's a really nice moment for him where he plays that character having that realization of like, wait, I'm a grandfather. And it's just a couple of seconds, but the expression he has on his face, and the emotion that hangs there for that second or two, is brilliant. And I think as much as as much as the humor was such an essential part of the original run of Frasier, actually some of the show's best moments were quite earnest and quite moving. So it was a really good early signpost in this one, that I felt just for that little second or two there that you got a little glimpse of that kind of this new iteration of Frasier, its ability to maybe pull that kind of thing off as well. So that was definitely there. And in a similar vein, the Martin Crane bookends to this, the conversation in the airport, the much briefer sort of start of the talk of, he'll be missed, and the fact that he's been coming back from the funeral, and then the really nice conversation between him and Freddie towards the end of the episode, and the moment they have the flag out on Freddie's lap when the two are reminiscing. And I mean, I think when I was saying about sort of one of my joyous things being a little bit difficult for this episode is that, I mean, John Mahoney, the clip used at the very end of the episode almost kind of steals the scene on the entirety of this episode for me. Which, when it's sort of like it's a 4-second clip or something, right? We're allowed to drop spoilers here, but just such a wonderful actor, and if you love the characters in that original run of the show, a very moving few seconds. So yeah, I think it's interesting to me that I'm not citing anything that was humor. Actually, both of my moments are emotional beats in the episode, but I think it's really important that a show that's calling itself Frasier is able to do those moments. I don't think it's a bad thing that they were some of the best ones from this first episode.
That's really interesting that you've picked those moments. So I couldn't agree more that one of the things that Frasier has done phenomenally is heart in an episode, in every episode. And yes, so for my choice, I've got two written down. One is the John Mahoney Martin Crane tribute, not just the clip at the end, but that, like you say, that whole scene with Freddie giving him the flag. I don't mind admitting that brought tears to my eyes when I
Yeah,
first watched it.
I really think that a lot of, and actually, I'd be surprised if it's not the majority of Frasier fans will have had that reaction. And it's whilst it is testament to how beloved Mahoney is by Frasier fans, and that character that he portrayed is, you do have to give props to this new version of Frasier. For, again, it's the kind of thing that would sadly be easy to get wrong, and I feel that it was one thing that the first episode did. So hats off for getting that right.
Yeah. And indeed, the other note I've got for Joyous is that it's back, but with familiarity, but without trying to replicate. It's not trying to be the previous 11 seasons of Frasier. It's standing on its own feet, but it does feel very familiar in the relationships and the dynamics. So yeah, it's interesting that neither of us picked a particularly humorous moment in this episode, but yeah, that emotion, that heart, that's the very core of Frasier for me.
Yeah, and I think without that, we whether both of us would have continued on to watch episodes 2 and 3. I think a lot of the fandom as well, if that had been absent, I think it has much bigger problems than if it's not as funny as the previous iteration straight away. So um, yeah. So shall we touch on the Jejune for this episode?
Jejune, yes. I mean, I've only got one note for this. I could have talked a lot. And like you said, it really is difficult for a pilot episode. They're trying to cram in, what's happened to him over the last 19 years. They're trying to cram into like a couple of lines. They're introducing all the characters. The actors haven't yet found their feet with those characters. New player who dis kind of, vibe to it all. So yeah, there's a lot of settling in that needs to happen as yet. But would you like the point that I have raised?
Blackballed. What are we talking about here, Stu?
I didn't understand, other than purely as a plot device, which to me that's not enough of a reason. It made no sense to me about Freddie hiding John, the baby.
Yes. I'm trying to think about the construction. I suppose he's wanting to basically get Frasier away again as quickly as possible. So maybe it is just as simple as sort of the less complexity and the less I have to go into my life circumstances and what's happened, the faster I can get the old man, out the door and away again. But I absolutely take your point that it's a little bit slapdash, the plotting as to what exactly the thinking is there and why that's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt too contrived to introduce the farce.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
felt,
Yeah. And
yeah,
actually, I think that's a really it touches on the fact that the farce in this episode uh, is attempting to be very original Frasier in nature, but I think it is not constructed with anywhere near the finesse that the original run managed with the majority of its episodes. So, with you even on a sort of a bigger scale of everything just feeling a little bit clunkier, and that's a great highlighting of a point that feels particularly sort of not really explained at all and sort of just inserted to move things along as you're saying. So yeah,
yeah.
I hear you.
A masterly summation there. Kudos. See, now we're doing
Well,
Frasier
thank you.
reviews. Well, my verbosity will come to the fore.
Yeah,
How about yourself? What was Jejune for you?
yeah. I think some of the humor was not great. I think the "this is bad" Sherry gag was maybe emblematic of that, where there's no real sort of work up to that gag. There's no real there's really very little to it. It's very slight humor, and it just sort of relies on Kelsey Grammer being able to be snobbish randomly about a glass of sherry. And we I think for fans of the original run, we love our complex through lines of jokes being carefully constructed and deployed in Frasier. And yeah, some of it just felt that it didn't come anywhere close to replicating that. So and I think as much as it's important to praise the stuff that this did get right, it's fair to say that there were things on that side that were not brilliant about this first episode. So what else did I had a couple other things. He bought the whole building. He didn't just buy the
Yeah,
apartment he lives in. He bought the entire thing. Now I know that like
wasn't for sale to start with,
yes,
and
right,
he
yeah.
did it in
So
one night.
he did it in one night. Um, I mean, there's always been kind of a running joke in the Frasier community of how can he possibly afford even the apartment he lived in the old one, let alone the entire building block that he buys overnight in this one. So it's nothing new, but I thought that it felt like a very big contrivance for the sake of setting up the dynamic between him and Freddie. So wasn't sure about that. And just the very last thing I would say is that it's something that is going to come up as over these episodes, because it's sort of unavoidable. It just is the way things are. That there is the discrepancy in cast experience is felt really quite strongly in this first episode, and it's going to continue for my money for the next two episodes to feel that way as well. That Kelsey Grammer and Nicholas Lyndhurst have so much experience behind them, and are so gifted and well regarded at what they do, that it is a really tough ask for some of the younger cast to hold their own in scenes and to try to come up to somewhere near those performances. And I think that that's the case sort of straight out of the gates here, and it is difficult. I think we'll talk about it more, but it continues to not be the easiest thing throughout the next couple of episodes as well. But that's enough of me being a negative Niles. We've had the Jejune. What about the quotes?
So I have a habit of writing them down, and for me, it's a reasonably lengthy quote. It is an Alan quote, and I suspect, because it was interesting that Nicholas Lyndhurst seems to be getting all the punchlines, or most of the punchlines in their dynamic, which I found quite interesting. But I'm sure we'll observe that more as the episodes go on. But it was when he said, "Macallan 25? This can cost thousands a bottle. I can't let you waste it on people who won't appreciate it. I know a bridge we can go under and drink it."
He says a lovely little bridge, right? I think I haven't.
Yes.
Does he? I can't
That
remember.
bit I
Yeah,
didn't write down, but it
yeah.
was
No,
the inference of you can't waste this on people who won't appreciate it. It actually reminded me of a Niles quote when Frasier's doing his will, and he says, "Oh, let's celebrate with I think it's a Chateau Lafitte or something." I was, "Oh, that's far too good for the likes of us," and puts his name on a sticker underneath the bottle because that's how he's wanting
yes,
things bequeathed.
that's a great moment. Yeah, mine was also an Alan quote. I went with cold, disengaged, narcissistic. She's called me all of those things.
Had some great lines.
But I must admit, the honorary mention here, of course, goes to "It all works out," right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's, if we're counting that in the episode, it's up there for quote of the week as well. So yeah.
definitely. Well, as we both had Alan, how are you finding Nicholas Lyndhurst? A posh Nicholas Lyndhurst. Of course,
Yeah.
he's famous for Only Fools and Horses, of course, as Rodney Trotter, and I forget the character's name because I never really watched it. But Goodnight, Sweetheart.
So I was sorry, right. I have not watched Goodnight Sweetheart, I think, since it aired in the UK. I was pretty young when it aired in the UK, but I remember really enjoying that show. And I'm probably in a minority, but from what I remember, I think I enjoyed it more than Only Fools and Horses, which I'm sure is absolute blasphemy to a lot of people. But it's certainly my big memory of Nicholas Lyndhurst growing up was actually, I mean, I guess it was on the air in a way that Only Fools and Horses actually wasn't when I was watching it. So maybe that plays a part in where it sits for me. But I was excited to realize that Lyndhurst was going to be in the revival. And I think that they're very lucky to have him. I think that Kelsey Grammer's sort of, when you think of that original cast, you think of John Mahoney, David Hyde Pierce, both um, uh, very experienced, gifted actors in their own right. And I think that Kelsey would be a bit lost in the first few episodes that we've seen here if it wasn't for having Lyndhurst to bring a sort of a similar level of acting experience into the project. And I think that Alan is that they have not. There are little glimpses of Alan giving Lyndhurst the material that he needs to really shine. But I think they're still trying to get that. They've not quite knocked out of the park yet. There's some good scenes in these first few episodes, but I think it can be even better. Lyndhurst feels like a really solid counterweight to Grammer in this show, and I think the dynamic between them is, if I was in the writers' room, is where I'd be focusing a lot of attention at the moment. So, how about you, Stu? Posh Nicholas Lyndhurst, professorial Nicholas Lyndhurst. What do you reckon?
Um, so, so it's not his natural way of speaking, the posh. The Rodney Trotter is probably closer to his natural voice. There are a few moments when it slips, and I've got my ears attuned to that sort of thing. So it feels a little strained in places, but I'm sure as the series goes on, that'll smooth itself out, like putting a bottle of sherry in a fridge. It'll soften the sharper notes. Uh, yeah, really interesting. So I'm going to brace myself for a bit of hate mail now. I really didn't like Fools and Horses at all. Never liked it. The cast, absolutely phenomenal cast who totally knocked it out of the park. For me, the writing was just trite and predictable. But that's how I felt about it. Goodnight, Sweetheart never really engaged me. But Nicholas Lyndhurst, you're absolutely right. He's a phenomenal actor, and yeah, I think he's got the gravitas to stand toe to toe with Kelsey. So he's the right man for the job. Definitely, definitely. Shall we move ourselves forward to episode 2?
Moving in, episode 2. Well, I talked about the joyous first for the last one. So, Stu, why don't you kick us off with your joyous moments in Frasier 2023, episode 2, Moving In?
So for me, it was absolutely wonderful. Again, it's that familiarity without being identical, but the role reversal you got between Freddie and Frasier, um, and the way Freddie was acting towards Frasier in a very similar way to how Frasier acted towards Martin, but from I suppose, a different sort of the snobby end of the spectrum. But even to the point whereby Freddie has told his friends that Frasier has died, or that his father had died. That's exactly what Frasier did, and I'm amazed that it wasn't commented. I'm amazed it wasn't referenced. That's what Frasier did in Cheers, and that was picked up on when you had the guest stars when Ted Danson guested in Frasier. It's like, oh yeah, did he tell you about the old man? No, actually, he said you were dead.
We were going through a rough patch at the time, or something like
Just
that.
had enough. Yeah, so yeah, getting that moment where like, it turns out that Freddie has told his friends his father had died. It just that really brought a smile to my face. Yeah.
Yeah, good catch. Yeah, I enjoyed that as well.
How about yourself? What was joyous?
There was a good few things in this episode. The overheard Boston Globe confession, right? This has to be one of the best moments in this, where the Frasier's giving his speech where it makes it sound like he's murdered his son, and I felt that was, in terms of humor, that this episode was punching closer to the original run with little moments like that. Really enjoyed that classic kind of overhearing out of context that takes place there. And I guess actually to touch on what you're saying as well, the little callbacks that are in this episode as well. One of the firefighters is called Moose, which was the name of the dog that played Eddie in the original run. And I think there's one or two other little Easter eggs like that hiding around in this one. So fans can tell us in the comments what I can't bring to mind, but I'm sure they were there. I think there was another couple little names being dropped in reference to the original series. I think the last thing for me is actually the scene just before the Boston Globe confession, where you have Alan and Frasier talking about Frasier's relationship with his son, and Alan writing on the piece of paper. He just wants what was the exact line again, Stu? Do you remember this?
He just wants approval from his father. That might not be verbatim, but it's definitely approval from his father.
Yeah. And I think that's that scene is really interesting for me, because I would actually argue that I think that Lyndhurst does the heavy lifting in that scene. Like Kelsey gets to have some fun spinning around on the chair, and yes, he does have to deliver the moment of realization, but I think that actually Lyndhurst's carries that part of that scene. As I was saying at the end of our talk about episode 1, just that it's so important for this show that there's someone else on the cast that can have that level of interplay with Grammer. So very Jejune moment for me in this one. Very Joyous moment.
Yes,
mix up my Joyous and Jejune.
That's a fantastic observation. And indeed, like as an actor myself, I know that some of the most challenging roles are the ones where you don't have any lines, you don't have any dialogue. I did a short film a few years ago where the entire thing was completely dialogue free, and having to convey complex thoughts, emotions, just with looks and small gestures. I mean, it's the most fun thing in the world, but it's also, Lyndhurst absolutely knocks them out of the park.
And that's a really great point, actually. I think that he's working so hard with what he gets in these scripts, and that's quite a good moment for him. He's really able to dig in, but there's so many little moments where the material's very slight that he's trying to perform some magic with. But I really appreciate it, and particularly this episode and the one that comes after. So big thumbs up for that for me. What about the Jejune?
Well, I'll let you lead us off.
Okay. I think that I would argue that a low point for all of the first 3 episodes is the baby shark gag. And I would not be surprised if some Frasier fans just picked up the remote and turned it off at that point, no matter how good the rest of the surrounding content had been. It's a pretty steep drop from ham radio and the ski lodge and the seal who came to dinner to baby shark gags. So the most Jejune moment of all our 3 opening episodes for me, that one.
That was your low point.
I think it's hard to beat that as a low point in these 3 episodes, but I will be eager to hear your effort and moments too. I had a couple of other quick thoughts as well. The Frasier's voice puts babies to sleep thing. Again, a little bit. It's not as bad as the This Is Bad Sherry, but it's a little bit sort of lazy or it was to me anyway, a little bit lazy and obvious and just not sort of not as scorchingly entertaining as so many of the little gags we got in the original run. And the other thing was the air hockey table. It's not awful humor, but it just kind of feels like something from another show. It doesn't sort of didn't resonate with me as a particularly sort of Frasier Frasier moment. So
Okay, that's quite interesting. I mean, yes, having to hear Baby Shark is a low point for anyone. It's yeah, hmm. I think your comments about um his voice. I don't know. He's got a very melodic, soft spoken way, manner of speaking. So for me, that landed okay, and especially all right. Eve's lines were a bit ham-fisted. Not the way she delivered them, but the writing of her lines was a little ham-fisted, but leading Frasier to believe that she was after it. Yeah, that plays it. He's got that kind of ego, that I could see that. So I'll confess I bought that moment, um, for the most part. Um, but in terms of being obvious, yes, I think this is something that we're seeing quite a lot. One of the great things about the original run of Frasier was its innovation, its ability to completely turn things and come up with surprises. So far, everything's been fairly predictable, um, for the most part. For the
yeah,
most
yeah,
part.
I can agree with that too. Yeah.
So yeah, the air hockey thing, I didn't dislike it. I thought, to me, that was it's standing on its own 2 feet. This is Freddie, I suppose, imposing himself, imposing his own standpoint, um, in a way that Frasier wasn't really able to do with Martin. Um, which it was just, yeah, I saw that as a whole be careful what you wish for, sort of moment. Want me to be involved in these decisions, I'll be involved. You want me to live with you, then I need to live with you. So yeah, yeah, we're in slight disagreement on that. Not massively, but
As close as we ever get in
disagreement's
these
a strong
in
word.
these reviews too. Yeah.
We're not going to
Oh,
come to blows over it.
I think interestingly for me, part of my underwhelming feelings about the air hockey table were that I much preferred the story and gags around the Fenway Park dirt in a box. And they're both kind of going on at the same time and are two sides of the same coin of having items in the apartment that Frasier isn't keen on. And I thought the Fenway dirt just sort of worked better for me and felt a bit more Frasier-y. Perhaps going back to those old Cheers kind of the sports connotations of the bar and stuff. I don't know, or maybe it's the sort of Martin sports connection from the original run, but something about that just ticked my box. And in fact, my quote of the week for this one comes from that, which is
Well,
the
before you
moment
do,
that.
before
Oh
you
yes,
do,
sorry, yeah.
shall I give you my Jejune first?
Oh, you have another. Oh yeah, we've not had your Jejune at
I know.
all.
I was
Okay,
just
sorry,
yes. I was
Stu.
I was
Yeah,
running commentary on yours.
I'm getting way carried away here. Tell us your Jejune thoughts.
So I feel really harsh doing this. Perhaps we should have skipped it. I do feel really bad doing this, but I've just got to say, David, hate the character, hate the performance. Hate's a strong word, but I it feels, and it's mostly in the writing, but I also think that the performer needs to take some responsibility for this as well. Feels like a parody of Niles.
Hmm.
Niles was never that bad. It's
So
like Niles turned up to 10.
there's multiple issues here, right? Because that's to do with writing, it's to do with direction, it is to do with performance as well. But and there's this is going to lead me on a little bit of a side path here, but it's something I wanted to talk about to do with all three of these episodes anyway, and it's as good a moment as any, which is that when you're talking about the familiarity, right, that it feels like Frasier without being a regurgitation of the original run, there is a lot of trying to position characters or have them affect in one way or another to remind us of characters from the original run or to touch on elements of their personality. Well, some of the most obvious, like the inversion of the relationship with Frasier and his son. There's very clearly like a Martin Crane role being filled by his son at that point. It's just a generational reversal, but um, uh, there's a little bit of this going on with a lot of characters, right? I think, would you say that's sort of fair to say?
Definitely. Is it? I was struggling with this lady's name, Olivia.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, she's clearly stepping into a Roz position. Evie's stepping into a Daphne position. Yeah, you can definitely see, and that's the thing. Nicholas Allen is stepping into a Niles position. So what is David
yes.
doing?
So I think another thing that kind of is going for Nicholas Lyndhurst is that he maybe manages to veer most away from. He's stepping into an Niles position more in the sense that he is the balance to Frasier still, right? Than that he is taking on the mannerisms and the or
Oh,
personality
exactly.
of that character.
He's the foil. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I mean, in that sense, he absolutely is taking on that, but it kind of gets him off the hook where a lot of the other characters wind up stuck on these moments of trying to replicate some to some extent or greater or lesser, and this kind of thing. And one thing that I think is very hard for David's character. If we play a little thought experiment here, Stu, like I want you to imagine that Frasier 2023 gets renewed for like 3, 4 more seasons that it runs for like a very good amount of time. I want you to imagine that over the years, as its success becomes clear, they begin to bring back more and more of the original cast. More and more people sign back up, not just to do guest roles, but to become recurring cast members throughout a season. I think that you then have a problem where you have all these characters who have little bits of Roz or little bits of Daphne or whatever, who suddenly then just have the original character on the show. And you're like, well, how does this work when I have a cluttering of people with similar personality traits? And the most damning thing for David's character is that if you had David Hyde Pierce on this show as well, I really don't know that for more than an episode you could have David on at the same time because it is such a direct reference to that character and that performance. His character has so little that really differentiates it and would let it stand on its own 2 feet with that original character that it's calling back to present as well. So a bit of an elaborate way to get there, but it's to say that I agree with you that there are problems with that character. Yeah.
No, that's a really interesting thought experiment. And yeah, I can see so much issue with it because I mean David Hyde Pierce, he was able to do that so brilliantly, still have an incredibly likable character with all these foibles, all these quirks. David as a character, I don't like. There's just seems nothing to redeem him.
It's just it's a huge ask, isn't it? I mean, I'm not familiar with this actor at all outside of his role here. He looks like he's quite young in terms of age and how much experience he can have under his belt as a result of that. And it's a very, very big ask to say to someone, look, we want you to mimic David Hyde Pierce's performance, which I mean, some of Hyde Pierce's performance in the original run is sublime comedy. The his segment at the start of Three Valentines, right, in terms of pure physical humor, is probably some of the best TV comedy there's ever been for my money. So worth acknowledging. I think that it's easy to see how far behind this character is falling, and that will make him unlikable to people. But my hope is, as for a lot of this show, is that we're still talking about, like, two or three episodes in. Let's fingers crossed, hope that it's a case of shaking out the ruffles at this stage, and that there's room for him to stand on his own 2 feet a bit more.
I desperately hope the writing improves for him so that it gives the actor an opportunity to actually get some character behind the character.
Yeah.
That's what I'm really hoping. Have you ever heard the term the sexy lamp before?
No. Please
So
tell me more.
it comes from a quote, and I've forgotten who gave the quote, but and I've forgotten the specifics of the quote. But the sexy lamp is a thing in film and theatre and TV, whereby if a female character could simply be replaced on screen with a sexy lamp, then it's an incredibly badly written character. Now, obviously, David as a character is not a sexy lamp, but it's of that nature. You could literally just remove the entire character from the series, from the episodes, and you wouldn't miss his absence.
I think that is, yeah, I definitely get what you're saying there, and I think it's not good, is it, Stu? It's not good to be in
It's
that
not.
situation in the ensemble.
I feel really harsh saying it because it sounds like I'm attacking the actor. I'm really not. I think it's the writing, but yeah, but then also the delivery. Yeah, it's like he's watched the original Frasier and amplified it.
I have seen online some people complaining that they feel that there are Sheldon, Big Bang Theory Sheldon inflections in his performance, and
Yeah.
I see what they mean, and that's not brilliant either. So yeah, yeah.
Well, maybe
So
if
it
there's
goes.
an episode that explores, David having autism or something like that, because Sheldon, wasn't just coded, he was out and out autistic. So if that happens, yeah, let's see where it goes. Let's move on to something much more positive now, which is our favorite lines. Then I know you were mad keen to get yours out.
Yeah, I am. I really love the moment. And actually, it's really funny because there's two halves to this gag, but the first half stands on its own 2 feet. And I think that the grammar maybe decides to deliver it this way purposefully because of this. It's the moment where he goes, I want to understand why that's important, when Freddie's talking about the box of dirt. And it goes on. It says, I want to understand why that's important. And he says, because to me it just sounds like a laundry problem or something. I can't even sort of quite remember the second half,
The
but
socks were in that dirt. Yeah.
yes, yeah. But the he deliberately gives that I want to understand why that's important, and it sits on its own for a moment, and it works so well for the character, and is such a nice moment of his continuing frustrations of not being able to connect with family members when it comes to sports. That yeah, I enjoyed that one. Got a hearty chuckle at that. So, what about you, Stu? What was line of the week for you?
So mine's connected with the air hockey table.
Ah,
Right.
okay.
It was, well, it's not so much the line as the the thing that happens straight after the line in response to it. Is when Frasier says, if you're going to make a point, just make it. And Freddie grabs a puck and throws it into Frasier's goal, making the point. I just that was that was classic Frasier to me. That being able to turn a phrase, the play on words, I mean, a visual pun, if you like. That made me feel very comfortable. Um,
Awesome.
yeah.
Yeah. And actually, so it's a good reminder, isn't it, that when you get these big shows like the original Frasier run, where people invest a lot in them and get really into them, what they mean to any given viewer can be really pretty radically different. And I actually quite like the fact that something that I sort of said, oh, I'm not really sure whether this is sort of Frasier to me, and I didn't really know whether this fit. I actually quite like the fact that you're able to say, no, that was absolutely Frasier to me. You know, this is one because I think that there'll be a lot of that. There'll be a lot of that going on in the audience. I mean, so many people love the original Frasier that we will not be the only friends sitting down and talking over and having moments where we agree on disagree on what constitutes that old Frasier energy coming through.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to the third episode and see if we disagree or agree on that. The episode First Class. What was joyous for you in this?
Always from in this, quite a bit. I really enjoyed the flashback to the lowering of standards on Frasier's TV show over the years. It really worked for me. I also enjoyed the callback to it at the very end of the episode, the kind of credits skit with him throwing hatchets and the cut as he actually goes to do the throw. So yeah, thumbs up for what we get, the glimpse we get of Frasier's missing years between the original run and the reboot. That was very cool to see the TV show that he worked on. Although I would say that actually I think that those literal flashbacks were much funnier to me than the referencing of it throughout the episode that takes place sort of in the classroom and otherwise. So I I chuckled more than I probably should have at Alan having a cat called Margaret Scratcher.
Yes. I really found that funny.
I did too. Yeah, so thumbs up for Margaret Scratcher. And I really liked the closing shot in the argument between David and roommates.
Eve?
Was Eve, sorry, yeah, David and Eve's argument in the classroom, where he says she's only in this class because my uncle pays for an apartment for her and her son. Um, and it was a moment where I think the construction of that idea of the farce of the class misunderstanding and having no context for this conversation that develops between them, and the whole idea that Frasier's planted her in the class and stuff. I think that the build-up is still not quite there in terms of feeling on a par with what we saw in original Frasier, but that little shot at the end I just thought got very close to capturing some of that original Frasier magic. So thumbs up for that from me. And actually, interestingly, I guess that is a David delivery. So I did really enjoy that moment. And as we say, maybe because it's an impactful bit of humorous writing. There's this little reveal that this is the situation between the two of them and the comedy of the misunderstanding. So that was my joyous moments. What about you, Stu?
No, for my joyous, I have literally written one word, four letters. Alan. Just the whole.
Mm.
I I I couldn't even pick moments. I just think Alan was brilliant and we got to see a lot of Alan as well in this
Yeah.
episode. So yeah, that was definitely a big boom for me. But yeah, absolutely. Margaret Thatcher, not one of my favorite people. It has to be said. But yes, the line Margaret scratching. And when he was talking about, oh yes, your Zen garden has been compromised. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh dear, yeah. So I'm a big Alan fan.
Yep, and I think it's totally fair to say that this episode, if you'd somehow sort of not really cottoned on to how much he's doing in the show and how much he's bringing to it, and then you really you got to notice by this one. I think it can't be passing anyone by this point how much of an asset he is for this show. So yeah, definitely agree with that one, Stu.
Definitely. And just the man's timing. There's a bit when he's as I came along because I thought there'd be champagne. And I brought you a cappuccino, and you see why I'm disappointed. That kind of, yeah. Anyway, Jejune. Let's move on to Jejune. What fell short for you?
Well, I have a really nice segue from your very last point there, which is that I actually cringed a little bit at that line because I think that jokes about Alan's alcoholism are wearing thin.
Ooh.
I don't think that alcoholism is something that should be mined for laughs necessarily in this day and age.
Mm-hmm.
I think it needs a careful touch where there is humor derived from it, and it is just constant with Alan's character. And it feels lazy in writing actually as well. Sort of the extra egregious edge to it here is just that Lyndhurst is capable of doing a lot more than making endless jokes about drinking. And I did feel by this episode, I was like, please just, at least ease up a little bit on this. There does not need to be unless you're developing towards, some sort of more emotionally involving storyline with his alcoholism and that sort of more earnest side of things that Frasier can pivot to. Sometimes it just feels overdone. Otherwise, I think to me at this stage. So my first Jejune point is that come on, give Lyndhurst something better. He is doing very well with what he's getting here, but jokes around characters' alcoholism, I think you can do better than that, Frasier 2023. So step up. But really, that was pretty much my only bad
Okay.
Jejune point for this episode. Stu, what about you?
That's so to respond to that, I think yes, 100% alcoholism is not a joke, it's not a laughing matter. But that's where subjective no. That's where these things can be subjective. You see, I'm not seeing Alan as an alcoholic. I
Sure, and because the
think
show
him
the
as a
show is
boozer,
yeah
but
the show is not explicitly saying that he is right. We see him sort of very suggestively knocked out from the whiskey on the couch when he was putting the blanket over him at the end of the first episode. Um, but I'm certainly what I'm hearing is a huge percentage of this character's dialogue involving
yes,
alcohol in some way, and saying that I think trying to uh, it looms large, right,
it's a big part of his
yeah,
character, definitely,
yeah.
definitely. And no, I can definitely see why. Yeah, it's just an interesting, seeing it through a different perspective. Yeah,
It
does
was actually
shift the
to,
whole
to go
thing really dramatically.
to go on a little sort of side story with this. This issue is a friend of mine made the point about we were talking about. Have you seen the Peter Jackson Tintin uh, remake? We
Yes.
were talking about how Captain Haddock is a hard character to update for contemporary audiences in general. And my friend said, yes, because alcoholism isn't seen as the sort of running gag it was when Hergé was writing the original comics. And yeah, I just, it's not like in Tintin, we don't really see Captain Haddock, sort of being we see him being I guess sort of lied as a result of being drunk or whatever. But again, it's not sort of it's not portrayed as gritty alcoholism, right, in Tintin. And yet I think that um again, the character spends a lot of time talking about drinking and going and drinking in places. And I sort of feel that there's a fair comparison to strike with Alan in Frasier here.
Definitely see room for greater sensitivity.
Yes, yeah.
Although that said, the gag with the book was one of my favorite moments in this episode.
Okay, yeah. No, I mean, yeah. Just I think we have different perspectives. I think actually setting aside the whole question um of whether the amount that the character talks and references alcohol and drinking, whether there's merit to deeper concerns about alcoholism and that there. Setting all that to one side, I just think that Lyndhurst can do more. He's had a lot of alcohol gags and jokes in these first few episodes, and I just want something more substantial for him to get his teeth into.
Yeah. Oh, I can definitely see that. Um, so my Jejune is a little less. It's a little bit more abstract, I suppose, a bit more meta. Um, I felt the way in which Frasier was dealing with the being a celebrity and that sort of following him and it being this chain around his neck kind of thing. I thought that was a massive influence from Kelsey Grammer's own association with Frasier Crane. Because we are seeing a very different Frasier Crane. And let's not forget, one of the major production companies involved in making this is Gramnet Productions. No, I don't know them very well, but I'm going to make a guess that they're involved with Kelsey Grammer in some way.
It sounds like it, right? Yeah, fair guess, Stu.
So yeah, the whole so Kelsey Grammer does get typecast horrendously. It's a downside to being successful in that industry with a particular character. I mean, we only have to look at Tom Baker in Doctor Who, or you know, so yeah, I really felt that the episode overall was massively influenced by Kelsey Grammer's actual real life experience in that way. Which, whilst I can relate to, well, relate is a strong word. I can understand it. Um, it felt out of place for me. It felt a bit out of place. Would he have? I think even there's a line from David about as that show that you did for 15 that you elected to do, or something. It, the character who would have chosen to have done that sort of showbiz, especially like by the 15th year and the way it was getting all what's the name of that talk show host who got couples together on stage just to argue?
There's so many.
They
Jerry
wrote an
Springer,
opera about him.
not
His catchphrase
Springer.
was "Take care of yourselves and each other." White haired chap with glasses, or grey haired chap with glasses. Anyway, that was kind of the vibe I was getting from the end of the Frasier Crane, Dr. Frasier Crane TV series. Yeah, I don't think a character would have gone down that route would so readily want to shun, dance with the one who brought you, kind of thing. Anyway, it's kind of a bit of a weird one. Thomas Jejune, I
That's
suppose.
it's definitely an interesting line. It's not something I had considered about the episode, but I totally see the parallels of the kind of do the thing, to quote The Simpsons,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
sort of pressure on Kelsey Grammer and the character of Frasier in the show and the potential for a parallel there.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're seeing it a little bit, every time there's allusions to the catchphrase "I'm listening." It's just that discomfort that is quite leaned on. I just perhaps I'm completely wrong, but I just sense that that's coming directly from Kelsey.
Good thought. I think, yeah, food for thought about the possibilities there, definitely.
Hmm. What about favorite lines though? What do you
It's
think
like a
it is?
Ponzi scheme of benevolence.
I
I
like
really,
that
yeah,
one.
yeah, I really enjoyed that one. Some of my favorite lines from these episodes are actually the ones that they're not really the sort of, you're intended to be sort of rolling around laughing, and yet they just strike me in a very Frasier kind of way that just sort of really gets me giggling. So yeah, that was me for this week. What about you, Stu?
Well, we are British after all. So for me, it was a two-part, and it was Alan's response that did it for me. Um, to, Totally predictable response and predictable line. Wasn't especially clever, but Lyndhurst's delivery was just sublime. Was when Frasier says Alan is lazy. He never finishes anything he starts. And Alan goes, and Frasier is. Oh,
Yes, great
the,
choice.
the,
Yeah,
I mean,
that
I've
was a
just
very
butchered
good
the
moment.
delivery,
Yeah.
but Nicholas Lyndhurst absolutely nailed that. And
Yeah,
it's
he
like you
really
said,
did. Yeah.
he's got this material that could perhaps be better, let's say, but he is absolutely 100% bringing his A game.
Yeah, yeah. You've got to admire the effort, and it pays off, and it pays off even in moments where what he has to work with is not helping him get there, which is impressive. So yeah, please, Frasier writers, give Alan a little bit more to get into, and open up his character a bit from the I think the sort of the notes that are getting very repeatedly hit about him not being fussed about his students and his job, and loving a good drink, and yeah, let him spread his wings a little, because Lyndhurst can definitely deliver, is what we're seeing here.
Definitely, definitely. Well, that wraps us up for episode 3, First Class. We have episode 4. I haven't, I'll be honest, I haven't looked for upcoming episode titles. Have you?
I don't think they're announced yet. I want to say that when you go and look on the streaming service of choice, at least, that there's just sort of nothing up for them yet. But let us know in the comments if we are incorrect or have overlooked this information somewhere.
Yes, and in fact, let us know in the comments whether you agree or disagree with any of our opinions or thoughts on any of these episodes or on Frasier in general. Because if you talk to us, we're listening. Sorry, I just I feel naughty
I
now.
feel like I should have a little glockenspiel in front of me to just play the outro on after you say
Yeah.
that.
Dr. Crane, your Glockenspiel is sprung to life. I watched that episode again quite recently. Oh, dear me. Absolutely brilliant. Right. Anyway, on that note, join us next week. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification icon so you don't miss another one of these as we delve into more Frasier 2023 next week.
Good night, Seattle.
until that, I can't do the peace and long life thing now because it's not Star Trek. How does Frasier sign off?
Uh, I think I'm correct in saying that there isn't really a ton of consistency over the seasons
Uh,
in that it tends to be a little bit dependent on what's happening in the episode. And oh no, I'm totally wrong, aren't I? Of course, he says something in good mental health. What is it he says again?
well, yes. Thanks for watching.
We're learned Frasier fans, really. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, to end our little podcast, thanks for watching and good mental health. Bye bye.